Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about the Way of the Longdeathmonk. If you like what we do here, please like, share, subscribe. We love to talk to you guys in the comments section. It's always exciting to hear from you. So we're very, very happy whenever we get the opportunity to do so. So that out of the way, we're going to talk about the monk. The Way of the Longdeathmonk comes to us from the Swordcoast Adventure Guide, which was one of the older books that came out. The great thing about this subclass is this dark undertone that comes with it. The flavor text insinuates that you're the kind of person that would capture a creature and do bizarre experiments to them in order to better understand the moment of death and incorporate that somehow into your martial arts. If you wanted to play a character that was like an evil plague doctor, this would work really well. Go into a scenario where there's a lot of plague existence and people are dying, and then bring your character in there, and instead of healing them, do whatever experiments were there and see how that affected their lives and create this seemingly false personality of who you are. Because your wisdom base, your medicine check should be really, really good. That indicates that you'd be able to pass off some information about that in order to verify what it is you're doing, enough to get into a scenario where no one's really going to question you carrying a whole bunch of corpses out of town because they could be alive, just concealed or unconscious because maybe you drugged them or something like that. It's very cool. You get this wonderful ability to do so, and because it's so different from the normal monk, you get this understanding that you're not just there for the purity of the art or the masterfulness of the fighting or that oneness that comes with wisdom-based characters. You come off the bat almost straight neutral evil, because it's not about life or death or morality. It's about understanding the process of death and incorporating that into making you a lethal fighting entity. At 3rd level, once you've selected this subclass, you gain access to Touch of Death. Your study of death allows you to extract vitality from another creature as it nears its demise. When you reduce a creature within 5 feet of you to 0 hit points, you gain temporary hit points equal to your wisdom modifier plus your monk level. Now, this is a constant thing, so as long as you keep reducing characters down, you will always gain this benefit. It'll keep replenishing and overshadowing. Again, temporary hit points don't stack, so if you kill one character, you don't take any damage and gain back temporary hit points after you kill another one, it'll stay at that level. It will be fantastic for your longevity. It makes that D8 hit die into something bigger. It makes you last a little bit longer, makes you a little bit tougher, and you can gradually regenerate depending on what you're fighting. Now, understand you're not really accessible to very AoE type of attacks, and plus you have to still be close to something. So singling your characters down and making strategic choices as to who you fight at what point is going to be very important to you as a monk, specifically with this class. Now, here's something that we got to talk about with classes like the monk. Now, your wisdom modifier is usually not your first because you are dexterity based, and you want to bump that up first for your regular attacks and your damage, because that's something you're going to be doing most of the time. Do not sleep on your wisdom. The reason why, because it affects your DC saves, which is important later on, especially with this class. It affects your ability to do stunning strikes. It ups the DC, the save DC for that. And for Touch of Death, it really makes a difference when you're adding 3 or 4 as opposed to just whatever it is on your level. It can make a very big difference. And also, because you're a monk, your unarmored ability is based off your dexterity and your wisdom. So it's worth it to have high wisdom as well as high dexterity, because this will complement each other and it'll boost your AC, and in this scenario it'll boost your temporary HP, which will just tack on to whatever it is you're doing, as long as you're able to kill something rather early on in your session or your campaign or whatever it is that you're particularly fighting at that moment. Minions against boss fights, it's a great way to replenish that to keep you going, and because you're a monk, you have a lot of attacks, so this can work to just knock off a smaller monster, and then get back into the fray with the big bad. It's a great way to be strategic and have you move around in the fight. It makes you not so stagnant where you're just running up to something and punching till it's down. It gives you this great incentive to go and attack a couple of different things on the field at the same time, coupled with the fact that your move speed is going to be very high as a monk. That's a very cool concept that you have the availability to work with. At 6th level, you gain access to Hour of Reaping. This is a little bit of a difficult ability to explain, so bear with me as I go through it. I'm going to read you the subtext first so that we understand what it actually does, and then we'll go into some of the implications. You gain the ability to unsettle or terrify those around you as an action, for your soul has been touched by the shadow of death. When you take this action, each creature within 30 feet of you must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be frightened of you until the end of your next turn. Couple of things to unpack here. There is no key requirement, there is no limit to how many times you want to do this, and 30 feet of you any creature, including your team. Why would you want to do this as a monk? Here's where you gotta play a little bit smarter. Because it's a 30-foot area around you, you can't hit your party. Yeah, you definitely want to be strategic about placing this ability. Also, gauging who you have as party members. If they're high wisdom, there's a pretty good chance that they might just make the save. It's good, it's valuable to maybe do that if it's necessary. In the event you need to prevent as many people coming forward as possible, this is what that's for. Get close enough to hit as many enemies and then back out. You have the movement speed as a monk to be able to do this better than anything else in the game, so make sure to take advantage of that. Get up, throw this, back out. As long as they see you, they cannot come towards you because they're frightened. That's part of the frightened condition. That limits the amount of enemies that be coming at you, which could be very beneficial because you can now focus fire them down and make your combat a little easier. That's just the first thing that comes to mind when I think about it. Also, I love the frightened condition. I love it. Anything that gives me the ability to terrify the enemy, it makes me feel so good. But you gain this ability to do so. Yeah, you're sacrificing a barrage of attacks because as a monk, that's all you do is attack a lot. If you're fighting casters or anything like that, and they have a spell going that you need to break concentration on, obviously don't do Hour of Reaping. Try and break that concentration. It's a tactical thing, and it does give you an option to do something different as a monk that you can't do in any other monk subclasses. So it plays a little different. But also understand, you can use this in other scenarios that aren't just combat. It's just an action. You could be in a scenario where you need to intimidate a large army and you're not in combat. And you can use this to frighten as many of them as possible. And maybe they'll just run. Maybe it will initiate combat, but it gives you this cool ability for you no longer to be the monk that's standing on the sideline going, maybe there's a peaceful solution, or be, the monk just waiting for someone else to do something. It gives you this opportunity to just stand above everyone else and scare everyone in the room. And think of the implications of a role-playing moment when your party is terrified of you. Like, think of that implication, you know what I mean? Like, think of how that affects what you're doing. Say it's an argument, say you're trying to save something, say you're trying to destroy something and the party doesn't want to do so. Throw this out there and that changes the dynamic of what's going on. Again, don't, try to avoid fighting your party, but understand what this could mean for future adventures, especially when you're talking with NPCs or friendly characters. This can do something to change those dynamics, It's a fun thing to play with. Again, talk to your DM if you're considering doing things like that, because if it's not in combat, it can have greatly defying consequences to those kinds of actions. So you want to be able to let your DM know, see if he's cool or she's cool with doing stuff like that. If not, whatever, pack it in, wait till the right moment. But don't sleep on this as just a throwaway ability. There will be scenarios when you can use it, and it'll be fun to do because you're scaring a large group. At 11th level, you gain access to the ability that most people go to the longdeathmonk for specifically. It is called Mastery of Death. You use your familiarity with death to escape its grasp. When you are reduced to 0 HP, you can expend 1 key point, no action required, to have 1 HP instead. There is no limit to this outside of your key point expenditure, so if you have a whole bunch in the kit and you haven't used them and you got thrown down, you survive. Playing out whether or not you jump back into the fight in combat or whatever scenario had occurred, or if you're going to wait it out and then come back afterwards, depends on the kind of cunning and deceptional like characteristics of who your character is. If they play with a lot of subterfuge, then maybe pretending to be dead might be more beneficial than popping back up or waiting for that right moment. This makes you wildly strong for survivability. You'll basically survive anything as long as you have one key point in your pocket. At 17th level, you gain access to the final ability of the wayofthelongdeath, adequately titled Touch of the Long Death. This is a very, very cool ability. The way it's written out states that your touch can channel the energy of death into a creature. As an action, you touch one creature within 5 feet of you, and you expend 1 to 10 key points. The target must make a Constitution saving throw, or it takes 2d10 necrotic damage per key point spent. On a failure, on a success, it takes half as much damage. If you went all out and used all 10, that's 20 d10 necrotic damage, and even if they succeed on the saving throw, that's still 10 d10 that they took. That is a massive hit to take. Gauge where you are in your fight when you want to use this. If you're fighting a big bad, things are going bad, and you've saved up enough key points, you gotta let them have it. You know what I mean? Like you gotta give it all. That's what this ability is really based around. Again, you don't have to use that many key points to get this thing going. You can use 5 and still pump out a 10d10 necrotic damage hit, depending on whether they save or not. You're high level at this point. Most campaigns won't ever really reach this level, but if you do and you gain access to it, the thematic part of just putting your hand on a creature and just watching it basically crumble and decay in front of you is beautiful. It is like poetic in how awesome this ability is. Our final thoughts on the Way of the Long Death Monk. If you wanted to play a plague doctor kind of a character who studies the dying and the death and really wants to capture creatures and do these experiments and really go into that kind of subtext that they wrote, it is very, very cool for that. It gives you the availability to be this really great neutral evil character. The abilities are awesome. You get insane survivability. You gain the ability to gain temporary hit points per kill. You gain survivability. You gain the ability to frighten everything within 30 feet of you, and you have this one single absolute destruction of an ability in Touch of the Long Death. It's cool. It builds really well. It's very based on just draining energy from everything around you, draining that life force, draining ki from other things, and becoming greater from it. Like, it really feels that way, and it gives you this dark ability to play a martial artist who's not good, who's not built on peace and using that strength of body to make the world a better place or anything like that. It's fully divulged into this understanding that through death you get stronger, and the more it happens around you, the greater it is for you, and it's like almost like this warlock life draining satisfaction from it, and it's very cool, very thematic. Love everything about it. I can't say enough of how this is one of the better monk subclasses, period. I think a lot of the times when I look at the monk and their classes, I'm always trying to fit another race into it or something that would work just based on fitting that kind of like a monster model into a fighting stance point. And this, it doesn't have to be that way. This, you are so very different from the other monks, and it has this wonderful dark undertone to it and this creepy factor, and it's You know, like it feels so good, and it plays and encourages you to play the monk differently, where it's beneficial for you to bounce around and attack multiple things because you can keep your temporary HP going. You know, it can keep you doing crazy things and being involved. And if everything is frightened, it has disadvantage on attacking you. You know, like it gives you better opportunities, and it's really based on this like outliving everything, because it's not just to beat your opponents, it's outlasting the enemies, and it reinforces that idea really well, and it's really cool. So with that, I'm gonna bring this video to a awesomely dark conclusion. Want to thank you all, and if you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking through to the end of the video. I really appreciate that. It makes such a big difference. Please like, share, subscribe, and above all else, thank you for giving a spooky kid a chance.